Good morning, everyone. My name is Rich Slomo. Welcome to today's New York State Archives presentation of developing office schedules. Today's presenters are Arthur Siegel and Sarah Durling. The session is being recorded and will be available for future viewing. If you have questions, please type them in the chat box to the right side of your screen, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. And now I will turn the presentation over to Arthur.
Thanks, Rich. Hi, and welcome to another New York State Archives records management presentation. We'll provide practical guidance to support your records management program. As Rich said, I'm Arthur Siegel, and my co-presenter is Sarah Durling. And today we're going to be talking about office retention schedules. Just to briefly go over today's agenda, this webinar will explain what office retention schedules are, how they relate to records retention and disposition, and how to create them. We'll provide specific examples as well as an exercise that'll demonstrate how to put one together. We'll also talk about the various ways office schedules can be distributed and endorsed, and why they can be valuable tools for managing records. So, what is an office retention schedule? Well, before we get into that, let's take a quick look at a couple of definitions. The two things I want to touch on are retention and disposition, and a retention schedule, both of which are key to records management. For our purposes, retention refers to the minimum amount of time you are legally required to keep records by addressing any legal, fiscal, administrative, or historical need for them. Once this minimum period has been reached, disposition can occur. Disposition can entail either destruction of records or permanent retention, which, for state agencies, means transfer to the state archives. Disposition is a way to easily control the number of records in an office by clearing out those you no longer need. Then there are retention schedules, which are legal documents adapted by local governments and state agencies that provide the basic information you'll need to effectively and efficiently manage retention and disposition. So let's take a quick look at a couple of examples. These are screenshots showing various purchasing records in both the Local Government Retention Schedule, LGS-1, and the State General Schedule. The LGS-1 is a comprehensive document that covers all records maintained by local governments, whereas the State General Schedule typically only covers fiscal, administrative, and personnel records common to agencies. State agencies also use agency-specific retention schedules that cover those records which are fairly unique to their organizations and are not found in the general schedule. As you can see, these retention schedules include a lot of detail describing individual record series, especially the general schedule. And this is just for a single item. I won't get into the particulars of retention scheduling here, as we have other webinars that deal with these issues in depth. But I just want to give you a sense of the level of detail included in these schedules as a means of highlighting some of the advantages of office retention schedules that we'll discuss later. A lot of this detail may not be needed for routine management of your records, and thus may not be needed for inclusion in office retention schedules. In fact, an office retention schedule is kind of like the Cliff Notes of retention schedules, in that it distills information from the formal schedules developed by the state archives into a document specifically tailored to the needs of your office, and as such, tend to be shorter and more manageable. Both the LGS-1 and the State Agency General Schedule have hundreds of pages that list and broadly define many records. This is intended to make them useful to a variety of agencies and local governments. However, no office creates or maintains all record series listed in these schedules, and it could be confusing and burdensome to sift through records that are not relevant to the function and activity of your office, just to locate those that are. So, what are the benefits of an office schedule? As I've already noted, they're concise, listing only those records that each office actually maintains. They're therefore shorter and often easier for each office to use than state archive schedules. Like state archive schedules, they also indicate retention, which is the number one thing people want to know. How long do I need to keep this record? But while state archive schedules show only legal minimum retentions, office schedules can go further by indicating whether or not you've decided to keep records longer than officially required and the reasons for doing so. This can serve as official documentation that keeping records longer than the state archives required is part of your normal course of business. Office schedules can also include records from disparate schedules. For example, if a local government maintains municipal records covered by the LGS-1, court records covered by the Office of Court Administration schedules, and vital records covered by Department of Health schedules, then its office schedule might include a mix of all these in a single convenient document. Similarly, state agencies might list a mix of relevant records on their office schedule from both the general schedule and agency-specific schedules. And finally, office schedules can serve as a subject matter list of records that fulfills FOIL requirements. Office schedules can thus help implement records management by providing staff with a shorter list of familiar records with just the information they need to know to manage them. Before creating your office schedule, you'll need to determine the format you want to maintain it in. Office schedules can be set up in a variety of ways: a list or a table in Word, a database or spreadsheet. Ideally, creating and maintaining one online will make it easier to update and share. A database or spreadsheet may be more flexible to update than a Word table, but it may require time to design it or a cost to purchase the software. Whatever electronic format you choose, keep in mind it will be necessary to regularly back it up and take steps to maintain it long term. A case file retention sheet is a subset of an office schedule and is a guide specifically created for case files that contain various types of records with different retention periods. For example, case files that may contain a mix of personnel, student, investigation, or project-related records. Case file retention sheets can be useful in providing guidance to staff about what records should be in a case file and how long they need to be kept. For creating your office schedule, you'll also need to determine who will be involved in creating it. There are two main stakeholders in this process. First, there's unit staff. Agency or local government staff are the ones most familiar with their records and will be using the office schedules on a day-to-day basis. They're the ones who will benefit most from having one and whose input is most critical. There's also the Records Management Officer, or RMO. The RMO is responsible for the records management program and needs to know what staff are doing in terms of records management. They're also going to be able to lend their knowledge about records management and help staff determine what should and what should not be included in an office schedule. So let's start putting an office schedule together. But first, let's take a quick quiz. What we'd like to hear from you about is what elements, fields, or information you think should be included in an office schedule. Please take a few minutes to consider this and type your answers in the chat. Afterwards, we'll see what the group thinks. Okay, so I'm seeing dates, records, retention schedule, item number, description, um, retention period, where the documents are stored, different LGS1 categories. So these are all very good suggestions. So let's take a look at some of these in a little more detail. So an office schedule should include these basic elements: the department, unit, or office that uses the records. Whether the office schedule is used by the entire organization or just for individual departments is key information. Including this can reinforce responsibility for records within individual departments and make it easier for staff to correctly identify and apply schedules to the records in their offices. It can also shed light on how different offices describe and consider their records. If a schedule has been created for the entire organization, including this field can help staff better arrange or filter records by department or unit. For the office retention schedule to work, it must identify the record series. Once you know the record series, then you can match it to an item in a schedule to determine the minimum retention period. The retention schedule item number is the unique number assigned by the state archives to each record series in a local government schedule or state general or state agency specific schedule. For instance, if you recall from our earlier example from the LGS1, purchase orders are listed as item number 546, vendor files are item 548, and indices are item 550. Including these numbers connects your office schedule to the formal schedule, giving you an easy way to refer to the formal schedule if needed. Compiling this basic information for an office schedule should be a coordinated effort, especially if office schedules are intended to serve multiple departments. This should be done with help from key staff in individual offices or units. Remember, staff that take part in the creation of an office schedule are more likely to feel a sense of ownership in the process and are thus more likely to use and maintain the schedule. There's other information that staff might also want in the office schedule, such as information about when records are needed in the office and when they can be moved to storage. This is based on the needs of individual offices, but can be a good way to plan regular transfer of records to storage as well as regular disposition. Having this information in your office schedule can make it easier for staff to determine when to move records out of the office to make space for new records. Including this type of information about active and inactive timeframes can also be useful if you need to coordinate moving large amounts of records from one or multiple departments to a separate storage space. Whether that space is owned by your local government or another government, lease space, storage with a vendor, or, for state agencies, the State Records Center. It might also be useful to include a separate comment field in your office schedule. This comment field could be used to document more specific processes or important attributes of your records, such as whether a record is the official copy or secondary duplicate copy, if there is a reason for longer retention, if applicable, whether a record exists in more than one format, any use restrictions or confidential records, the method of destruction, notes about preservation or weeding steps, and transfer procedures, or whether sign-off is needed for transfer or destruction of your records. Your office schedule may also include alternate names for schedule items that are more commonly known to your staff. Your agency or government might call a series of records by an informal or common name that's different than the name listed in the State Archives schedule. This could make records easier to identify if staff are accustomed to referring to them in this way. Having them on your schedule will make them easier to identify. Your goal should be to create something you and your coworkers will use. Don't make it more complicated than necessary. So here we have an example of a very basic office schedule created for local tax assessor's records. In addition to the standard fields for record series, schedule number, and minimum retention, you can see that it also breaks out the retention period between the amount of time the records are maintained in office space and the amount of time they're kept in inactive storage. As I mentioned earlier, this is a good way to aid in records management and storage planning, as the information can be specifically tailored to individual record series. Here's another example of an office schedule. This one created by the Department of Environmental Conservation for Employee Relations Records. It was created in a database, which for a large organization with many departments would mean sorting records by department to create schedules for individual offices. Its department information is in the header, and from there it includes links to further information and schedules created for the agency's unique records. The office schedule here also includes a description of the record, a description of the type of event that closes a particular type of file, how long the file must be kept after closing, and if it should be destroyed if it's not permanent. Finally, it's important to remember that electronic records should be included in your office schedule, as they are covered by the same laws and regulations as other records. Office retention schedules can help manage electronic records by reminding you that they exist. Digital records can become invisible on our computers, and people often store them haphazardly with multiple copies in various locations, like individual hard drives, different locations on a network, and backup copies. Without a reminder, staff may fail to dispose of these records. A good office retention schedule should indicate whether the electronic or paper version is the official copy, but this decision is up to you. It can also help ensure that electronic records are purged, digital storage space is saved, and personnel are not hampered by a mess of digital records. You should also consider whether you're able to manage and maintain electronic records as long as required by your schedule, particularly if they are long-term or permanent records. What are you going to do to ensure that this happens? Ideally, records management staff should partner with IT staff to identify the locations of each copy of electronic records scheduled for destruction and determine the best way to eliminate access to all copies. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, who is going to continue.
Thanks, Arthur. Hey, folks. So Arthur has given you an excellent overview of what is an office schedule, what should be in it, why you want to have it. What we're going to do is kind of go through the process of building one, because you're going to be awesome at this, and I know that you can do this. But sometimes it helps to have a guide to what steps to take so you don't go, oh man, I don't even know where to start. So we're going to start with our HR department, mostly because it's universal across most governments at this point, well, at any point really. But you want to start with a department that's going to be kind of like low-hanging fruit that you know is going to play nice with you, that wants to have one of these, so that you can figure out what you're doing before you continue and expand out to various other departments. Trying to do the entire government all at once, unless you are a very small government, can potentially lead to you getting backed up, getting stopped up in places where I can't get this person to talk to me, or I'm just overwhelmed. So you want to kind of start small, figure out what you're doing, and then expand out. In this case, we're looking at our HR department. They manage hundreds of records, but the retention schedules are kind of hard for them to understand, and they can't figure out what they need to keep, what they need to destroy. They're looking at this 400-page booklet going, oh my gosh, what? Um, they have a lot of electronic records stored on a server. They really could use some office schedules to help them figure out what they want to do with their personnel records and how to manage them appropriately. So we're going to help them out. In the chat, please put your chosen A, B, C, D, whatever chosen answer. First things first, what's the first thing that we are going to do? Are we going to A, start pulling items from the personnel section of the schedule? Are we B, going to call the state archives and ask for a sample office schedule? Or C, are we going to set up a meeting to start talking to HR staff? I am seeing some really good answers out there. You guys are thinking kind of like I'm thinking. My first choice would be to talk to staff. because they're the folks who know the records and they know what they have and what they're creating and how they need to hold on to them. So you talk to them, set up that meeting, make sure you have all of the stakeholders at that meeting, or at least have access to them, so that you can find out what records that office is creating, where they're storing them. Are they storing them in the office? Are they storing them in long-term storage? You've got a records room down the hall or 3 buildings over. Um, how long they need to hold them in their office, if that's a concern. These are really active for like the first 2 years, and then we never really touch them again, but we have to hold on to them for 6, 7, 34 years. Um, so they could potentially go to storage at that point. Ask about how they're used, because maybe you could have suggestions about how they organize their storage. Make sure that you're documenting where a series crosses formats. You're seeing this a lot for the big long-term record series. You see it for your personnel records. You see it for payroll. If you're dealing with students, you see it for their student records, where you have records that started off as a paper format. You've got your really earliest ones are all typewritten and very nicely organized, and the most recent ones are being written up in Word or in a specialty software system. You want to make sure that part of the information you gather documents where that crosses formats, because that can help inform the information that you put in there about where they're stored and how they get transferred to different places and when. If you have the wonderful inventory already built and you're maintaining it, this can be helpful, because you can always go, hey, you have this record series associated with you, but you guys didn't mention it. Can you talk to me about this and provide more information about it, so that you know that you're touching on everything? For example, I know I'm a little absent-minded, right? And if you come and ask, Sarah, what records are you creating? What are you doing? Where are they? I'll tell you everything that's off the top of my head, and probably extensively. But then you'll probably get an email like a day later going, oh, and I forgot about this. And then another one like 15 minutes after that. And they're here as well. So that inventory can help you ameliorate that a little bit, because you'll already have the information in front of you. You just need to get more information about what exists. If you picked contacting the archives for sample schedules, that is also an excellent choice. I would suggest doing it concurrently with, setting up that meeting to talk to other folks. I mean, yeah, I can totally see wanting to have a sample schedule in front of you to look at and go, okay, this is kind of what we're trying to build. But I do want, and we have samples that we're more than happy to share with you. Although you want to use these as models for what you're creating. They are not the be-all, end-all answer of, here is an office schedule, this should be everything that you need, because it's not. Everybody creates a different set of schedules. We might not have something that meets your specific circumstances exactly. So really, these are a starting point. This is an example of what you want to build. Maybe you can steal some of the information from that and use it for your own, but at the end of the day, your office schedule should reflect your organization's specific needs. All right, next question. A, now can we pull from schedule items? B, organize the information that you have gathered. Or C, go talk to IT to find out more about the department's electronic records. I'm not going to make you suffer through another rendition of the Jeopardy theme. I'm not that evil. All right, looks like we've got some pretty solid answers in here. Everybody's kind of in agreement. You've got a whole bunch of information here. You want to know what you've got and organize it, so that when you go talk to other folks, or have to go, whether you're talking to IT or going back to the unit, you can be informed about the questions that you have. So identifying what series you're looking at, what the volume is, what the date ranges are, where they're stored, all of these things that you've already heard from Arthur, and I saw everybody throwing in the chat. You guys were right on top of that. Noting where they are in electronic format and where they cross over. Having information about how they're used, because that can be really important when you're trying to figure out, okay, this needs to stay in this record storage area and then move it to this at this point, or this really needs to stay in building A. It can't ever go to building B because our inactive storage is because we're just in and out of it all the time. Any office specific terms used when discussing the records. So I work with school districts mostly in BOCES and community colleges. Basically, if you're an education-based local government, I'm your girl. And I answer a lot of retention questions, not the scary ones like Arthur gets, but you know, I get some really interesting ones. But I'll get folks who call up and go, Sarah, how long do I have to hold on to the XYZ form? And I'm sitting here going, 'cause I have no idea what the XYZ form is. Sometimes I can look it up on Google and it'll be a standardized form that I just haven't run across before. So, you know, first time. Sometimes it's a form that's just what they call it in the office. That's their colloquial term. That's their local term. Or it's something that they've created inside their government. And I have to go back and go, can you tell me what that is? Having that local term and associating it with your specific retention schedule item term can be really helpful when you're talking to folks about how long they have to retain the records, or if there's any questions that council might have, or questions you might have for the state archives, or you know, if you've got a FOIL request that asks for something very specifically, it could be really helpful to have that information in there. You also want to note any concerns the staff might have about the records, such as, you know, these overlap with this record series over here, or I know that this department is creating or maintaining the same set of records, or, you know, we're looking at moving this record series into electronic format in the next 5 years, just so that you know what's going on there. You do want to talk to IT. I always recommend talking to IT when you're dealing with electronic records, because they really are going to be your best friend in terms of what's out there, how much of it's out there, what systems it's in, how well those systems are doing, how healthy they are, how healthy your storage system is, whether things need to be updated, whether things have been abandoned, whether somebody has put all of their records on a local area network file folder that nobody can access because it was given specific permissions to them and they have since retired and moved to Aruba. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you want to talk to IT. In this case, they know the systems that the records are going to be in, because you're going to want to document that information. They're going to know where they're being stored on the local area networks or in your content management systems, so that you can include any information that's relevant to those records that should be in your office schedule. All right, next question. Now can I pull items from the office in the retention schedule? A, yes. B, no. C, it depends. I love that we have managed to get so many people on the it depends wagon, because that is so much about records management. A or C is probably the best answer. You know, you might have unresolved questions or issues that, yeah, maybe you're not in the right place for this at this time. You still need to talk to X person, Y person, or something just doesn't make sense in the information that you have, in which case you want to go back and follow up on that before you start pulling things from the schedule. But if everything looks kosher, everything makes sense, then yeah, you probably pull things from the schedule at this point. You know what the records HR has, you can identify the right items for them. In the case of the HR, most of the schedule items are going to be in the personnel sections of the local government and state agency general schedules. There might be some agencies who are still running around on RDAs, just throwing that out there. But for the most part, they're going to be in those sections. That said, there might be records that, for whatever reason, are not found in those sections. You're not going to that section. You can explore other parts of the schedule. And if you are not sure if something works for the record series that you're looking at, going, well, this sounds like that's what we're looking at, please feel free to reach out to the folks in the archives about any questions you have, because we're more than happy to help you figure out what you're looking at. All right. This goes back all the way to the original question Arthur threw at you guys. What do you include in these? A, series or and title and description. B, retention schedule number. C, retention period and any modifications. D, comments. E, active and inactive storage periods. F, department. G, all of these. Or H, all of these. And Sarah, I don't know if you realize this, but you missed. I'm still pointing accusingly at the screen like y'all are pointing at me going, Sarah, you aren't thinking about this. All right, yeah. G and H are the options here. You know, everything listed there is a valuable inclusion. There is a place for everything in there. Not everything necessarily needs to be included because it's really going to depend on what your needs are and what your goals are for the office schedule. But yeah, it could be more, it could be less. You know, there could be fields that are not listed there that you need to have. It's very dependent, as somebody said, I saw it go flying through the chat, on your organizational needs. That said, if you're going to be creating office schedules and you're looking to do this for your entire organization, your entire government, you want to establish kind of a standard set of fields that you're going to be using so that there's uniformity across all of the schedules. You might need to be a little bit flexible, you know. You might need a comments field for some departments and you don't need a comments field for other departments because it's just very cut and dried as to how those records are going to be handled. But yeah, generally you want to have a set template that you can use so that, you know, everybody knows how it works. They can find the information in the same place. If you've got people who lateral across the organization, you know they can look at the schedule for the department they came from and the department they're going to, and it works the same way. It's not going to be confusing. They just, you know, need to update their knowledge of what records they're using and what records they're creating. It makes your life simpler, particularly when you get to the updating of these things. Okay, we've got a version of this on the floor. We have it written, it's organized, it looks pretty. What do I do with it? Do I A, put it in a locked drawer, B, share it as a draft with HR staff, or C, mass email it to the entire organization, setting off an unending chain of reply alls? I don't see C happening very often anymore, and honestly, I'm kind of nostalgic for it. I mean, was it fun? Sometimes. Usually not if you were the person getting all of the emails, but I don't know. I feel like that's a relic of early internet, you know? But yeah, you guys all are right on top of this. It's B. You know, you need to, it's a draft. It's a first draft of the schedule. Hopefully you are going to plan to share it with the HR staff so they can look at it and go, okay, yeah, this makes sense. You've got all of our information correct. Or they can go, well, you know, I don't necessarily agree with this, or I don't think you have the right number for this one. You do want to set a deadline for comments and revisions because if you send things out into the void without a deadline, you sometimes don't get them back. I don't know if anybody else has experienced this. So set a deadline for comments and revisions, and you know, if you hear from them, you go back, you review, you implement, you send back that draft so they can approve it. If you don't hear back from them or they say, hey, this is awesome, we don't need to have anything to add, then you can establish that as your final version and set that up to distribute to your organization. Huzzah! We have a bouncing baby office schedule. Are we excited? We are excited. We got to do something with this now, don't we? You want to make sure this is distributed far and wide to the people who need to have it. So if you're doing just one department, make sure everybody gets a copy of that. Make sure that they have, whether it's emailed or whether it is a physical copy that you put in your hand, make sure that they have a copy of it. Also make sure that it's readily available in a centralized location. Again, could be a paper copy, but at this point in time, you probably want to put it on your local area network, or if you have an intranet, you put it on your intranet so that they can go and retrieve it and access it whenever they need to without having to ask somebody, where did this go? I mean, they're probably going to still ask what the URL for it is, but you know what I mean. You do want to include this as part of your records management policies, and I hope everybody has an awesome set of those, because you want to make this part of your policies that, hey, we have an office schedule, therefore you follow the office schedule to manage your records. And if you have questions about how this works, please contact X, Y, and Z. You do want to train people on how to use this. You don't want to just throw it at them and run away, because if you don't tell people how to do things the way you want them to do it, they will not do it. They are not psychic. So you do have to explain how things work to folks, and maybe do a demonstration of, okay, I have this box of records. It's labeled X, Y, and Z. I look at the retention schedule. It says it's this item here. And hey, these are past the retention period. We can dispose of these, so people understand how it works. And then you also want to include these in the new staff orientation. You're hiring somebody brand new. It's amazing. We're hiring people. Yay! You want them to manage records correctly right from the get-go, right? You don't want them to ask Louise, who is a repository of all office knowledge. And Louise is a wonderful person. She knows how everything works. But she might not follow the exact same rules or include all the information that you need them to in explaining how to do things. So if you teach them and include that in their orientation training, they don't have any room for confusion. They learn everything correctly right off the bat. You do want to promote this, and this is a great tool to promote records management within your organization, because I know that it's not everybody's favorite thing to do, and I don't understand it. Records management is the best. I mean, don't you all think it's the best? I do. But developing office schedules with a unit gives them, as Arthur mentioned, ownership of their records. It gives them some buy-in that, yeah, no, we created this thing and we put the effort into it and it's ours, so we're going to use it now. It's really helpful, and if you can do that for the entire organization and get them, raise the awareness of what records management is and why it's important, and make sure that they are following retention schedules and office schedules to dispose of things. Because if you throw a 400-page retention schedule in front of them and then maybe a stack of onion skins on top of it if you're at a state agency, they're going to look at that and look at you like you're insane and run in the other direction, right? So using that office schedule, which is 3, 4, 5 pages long, to promote records management, going, it's not that bad. Look, this is all you have to worry about. It is really helpful. They're great for helping you set up those periodic cleanouts that Arthur was talking about. I am a big fan of doing disposition days. April is records management month, so I kind of like try to associate it with spring cleaning, right? So you take a day, everybody comes in the office, they're wearing jeans, you are blasting Springsteen or Biggie or whatever makes you happy over the loudspeakers. You order all sorts of terrible cheap pizza and bagels for your staff. And what you do that day is you go through your filing cabinets, you go through your electronic files, and you dispose of the records that you no longer need. The paper ones go into secure recycling, or you make sure that they are set up for transfer to whatever storage location they need to get to. So if you have records that are supposed to go after 2 years, and it's been 2 years, supposed to go to long-term storage from your office, that's the day that you go through, put them in boxes, and appropriately label the boxes, which hopefully you have a policy and instructions on how to do, so that it can appropriately go to storage and, be well managed. These can also be used to help explain the benefits of records management. Look, your office is clean and organized, and you can find what you're looking for. So you're not spending 3 days in the basement trying to figure out where these records are, because, well, either you've already destroyed them or you know exactly where they're supposed to be because you were following your retention schedules. You do want to plan for revisions. This is not a document that you are going to create, throw in a cupboard, and it's going to be good in 20 years, because it's not. One, the state archives occasionally updates its retention schedules. I know it's shocking and amazing. Local governments, most recently, you had an update in 2022, plus there's been a couple of memos added to the local government retention schedule that you need to be aware of. State agencies, I mean, you guys can create RDAs at any time, and the schedule is the retention state agency schedule was updated relatively recently. So, I mean, you want to make sure that you are updating your office schedules to reflect what's in the state archives retention schedules. But also, there are new laws and regulations, or you have new processes, or activities that you're coming up with within your organizations, within your governments. You have, if you're a local government, you built a community center with a pool, and suddenly you have a rec room that all the Girl Scouts want to use. So you're getting records on, can we use the space? Or, there's all sorts of different things that can go on that result in you creating new records. And you want to make sure that those new records being created are on your office schedules, that they have been included there so that they are also being managed appropriately. So, have a plan to take a look at those, every 2, 3, 5 years, or, if there's a trigger, we know that we're creating a new set of records because there was a new law that went into play. Make sure that that's something you're on top of. So, in summary, office schedules have a lot of value. They give you more control over your records. They help formalize your policies, eliminate confusion, document where things are and what you want to do with them, encourage people to manage their records appropriately, identify your permanent records. We really didn't harp on that much, did we? But I mean, your schedules are going to say, hey, these are permanent records. So people ideally don't dispose of them by accident. But at the end of the day, I mean, the big selling point of office schedules is that they make your work easier. Like, we try to make your work easier by giving you the retention schedules as they are, because we've already done all the research, or we've made Arthur do all the research, to why you need to have these particular retention periods, what laws and regs and what's the use of these records that affects those retention periods. But then you can take those and break that down even further into just the things you need. I am a state agency. I maybe do not need to have access to this, and our specialty is this, so I don't need to have all of these items in my schedule. So they are very helpful. They can be a benefit to you, and they make your work and the work of your colleagues easier. And if you have any questions about, developing these, because I believe in you, Arthur believes in you, I'm sure. I'm sure Rich does too. If you have questions about developing these, you need help, you're not sure where to start, give us a holler. Our contact information is right there, that recmanagement@nisa.gov. We want to hear from you. In fact, I'm really excited to hear from some of you. Yeah, reach out to that email address and it will get directed to the person who is going to work with your government type specifically. We do have divisions that are set up for state agencies. Local governments are divided out by government type. So like I said, I deal mostly with education-based local governments. We have somebody who covers towns, somebody who covers counties. I saw her running around the chat earlier, somebody who covers villages. So there is somebody for you, and we will make sure your question gets to the right person. And with that, thank you. I believe in you. What questions do you have for us?
Okay, Sarah, we have a couple of questions here. We have a question from Elizabeth. Can we get copies of sample office schedules emailed to us?
Yeah, totally. You just send us an email. We'll make sure that you get, and tell us what you're looking for. For example, I have a couple of sample schedules for school districts, but they're not comprehensive.
Okay, also had a question here from Jennifer, to which you sort of mentioned, kind of alluded to this earlier, Sarah. Is there a New York State Archives team contact who specializes in law enforcement / police departments?
Not specifically that granular. We have somebody who's in charge of villages. We have somebody who covers towns. We have somebody who covers counties. So depending on what kind of government where you're based out of, we'll have somebody for you. They're not law enforcement specifically.
Yes, and as you said, Sarah, send us an email and we'll get it to the right person. Okay, let's see. Just waiting for some folks to type in any other questions you might have. And I just want to reiterate that this webinar is being recorded and will be made available, as are all of our webinars. So if you ever want to view them, you can either go to our website and go to the training tab, work your way down there, or just Google New York State Archives webinars. You can find us on YouTube as well. Oh, Jennifer asks, will team members be attending Niagara next week?
Yep, we have a booth there, so please feel free to hit them up and say hi and get information from them. And I think we have a couple of presentations going on too.
Okay, see if we have any other questions here. Sue asks, how do we get a copy of the models/templates?
Send an email to that email address, or if you know who your specific advisor is, email them.
And as Sarah mentioned, we love getting emails, so keep those cards and letters coming in, folks. And we will work with you to answer any of your records management questions or address any of your training needs. All right. So if anybody has any questions, please type them in the chat and we will answer them straight away. Jennifer asks, are there instructions for New York State Archives records database?
It depends on which database you mean. But if it's on the website, then yes, there are instructions. If they're not on the website, probably not, but feel free to reach out and we'll see what we can do.
Okay. All right, Josephine said thank you. I don't see any other questions, Sarah, so maybe
All right. Well,
can
we'll let people go early. Then, well, it's maybe a little early for lunch, but it's a good time for a coffee break, right?
it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Exactly so. So
Yeah, I wonder if we should mention that we're going to be at the state fair this year again.
oh yeah. So guys, if y'all are gonna folks, if y'all are gonna be out at the state fair this summer in Syracuse, New York, we are going to have a booth in the back of the Center of Progress building. If you go behind where the sand sculpture's been the last couple of years, we're on the back wall. Please stop by and say hi, get a magnet and a sticker, and ask us whatever questions you might have. Yep, the Great New York State Fair.
That's right. We'll be located, as Sarah mentioned, in the Center of Progress building, right next to the loading dock. So you can
Hey,
bring
we
your
get a nice
records to
breeze.
us. No, just kidding.
You get a nice
But,
breeze there.
yeah, it's very nice, little fresh, and we'll have some tchotchkes to hand out and get to meet our folks.
Yeah.
And
And usually we are right down from the office of the state comptroller people who are helping you find lost money. So that's also nice too.
that's right. There's plenty of state agencies there, which is very nice, and we'll be one of them.
Indeed. So,
Barbara made a comment here. She's saying, thank you. I learned that the electronic records should also be on our schedule. And she said, good job. And we thank you. So plenty of thank yous coming in, and we appreciate you folks participating in our webinars. And with that, Sarah, I could probably turn it over to you.
all right. Thank you so much. We really appreciate having you. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Bye, folks.
Bye.